Hi, my name is Fred Newman. Today I'd like to cover some of the things I didn't have a chance to cover in the previous video on the Expo-Dev software for the Palm Pilot. First, I'd like to talk about the use of the zone system in the Expo-Dev software. It's interchangeable. You can either use incident or zone, or you could use both when you want to do one side of the film holder with the zone system and compare it to the incident system on the other side. I'd like to also show you some of the other features, the depth of field program, so you can check your depth of field to see if it'll work for the photograph that you're taking. Also go into the details on the close-up program and just how to do the filter factor on here. So I will start with the zone system. In the last video I mentioned I was going to do the zone system with the Expo-Dev software. So let's change to the zone system. So let's just touch the screen at zone. And let's say we have filter film holder number 2, the same flare, the same lens. This time we'll do 100 Tmax in DDX 1+9. And the same paper exposure scale of 1, which is for most of my papers. Okay, now you'll notice here it says low EV, low zone, high EV, high zone. So let's just change this to 10. And let's say, I always recommend for the low zone, black with detail would be zone 3. And for the high zone, do zone 7. You always want to get it a little bit further spread. Black with details, white with details. So if we measured the black with details was, let's say, EV10. The high was EV14. We'd get a subject brightness range of 7. And we have an effective film speed of 114. Now you notice here it says enter test EV. What that means is we can determine between these two EV values. Let's say we have an important tone, and let's say it's at, whoops, wrong space. Here we go. Okay, let's say we had 12.5. So if we had a tone in our scene that was an EV of 12.5, that would be approximately a zone 5.5 in tonal quality. So we could actually measure approximately what kind of tonal quality some of our subject will have. So let's continue on. We're not going to worry about these. We'll talk about these next. And let's put in a more reasonable f-stop here. Let's say 32. So herefore we have f32 and 1/3 at 1/4 of a second. So it always rounds off to the nearest shutter speed. And if you wanted a little bit more depth of field, you could just tap this, let's say f45. So it would be approximately f32 and 2/3. Again, it rounds it off to a half, so you might have to push it up a little bit more. So it would be f64 and 2.5, whoops. So it would be f64 and a half at 2.4 seconds. Let's go back a little bit. f32 and 2/3 at 1/2 second should be fine. And again, you've got all the information here. And again, at the bottom of the page, it's got our exposure here, f32 and 2/3 at 1/2 second. And our developing time for this sheet of film would be 7 minutes and 13 seconds. So we could record it. This will be recorded on our memo. I want to show you this screen. You notice this where it says the current metering exceeds the range of your chosen material. That would mean the contrast is either too much or too little for your actual film test. So you'll see this pop up when the contrast range is outside of your materials that you've been working with. So let's make this 13. So now we've got a subject brightness range of 8 and a film speed of 109. Now I want to show you a filter factor. The best way to get your filter factor is either from a chart. Like let's say yellow filter is usually 2. So you just enter 2 and it would automatically correct your exposure for that. Then the close-up program, there's basically 3 ways to measure your bellows correction. You can either measure distance, which would be the subject distance, which is basically the distance from your lens to the subject that you're photographing. You can measure extension, which is actually the bellows extension, and it's usually from the ground glass to your lens board, or you can enter the magnification. So if your actual subject was this big and you measured it, and it was this big on your ground glass, you'd enter magnification, how much you enlarge it, and that would tell you your correction for exposure. To me, the easiest to use is the bellows extension. I usually carry a little 3-foot ruler, and I can go very easily measure from the ground glass to the lens board in inches. So we have a 150 lens. Let's say we have 12 inches. So our exposure at f32 is 32 at 4.4 seconds. And this will also work with our timer here. So we've got the timer again. And again, it's countdown. And we delay the exposure by 3 seconds. So basically you hit the start button and you click your shutter. And it tells you when your exposure is over. And again, we can record this and restart it. And let me go the other, I want to show you one other thing. Actually, let me put some information in here. Let's do 10 and 12. So the low EV would be 10, the high EV is 12. The same information we're going to use on this first screen. We've got this here as we had before. Now let's look at the depth of field program. So you can either do two ways. We could check the depth of field, and let's do feet, and let's do aperture of, let's say, 45. And let's say the subject distance is 15 feet. So if we had a subject distance that was 15 feet away, we'd be in focus at f45, and we focus at 15 feet, we'd be in focus from 8.5 feet to 65 feet. This is kind of useful when you're indoors and it's very hard to focus. You could actually measure the distance that you want to focus, set the aperture, and it'll tell you what the near plane and the far plane is. The other method to do this is to choose. So let's start from scratch. Let's say we have a near plane of 15 feet and a far plane of, let's say, 1,000 feet. Okay, so we would need to be at, if the near plane was 15 and the far plane was 1,000 feet, we would use the aperture of f22 and 2/3, we'd focus at 29.6. So if you want to do infinity, let's say we'll do a mile, a little over almost a mile, f22 and 2/3, you still focus at 20, you still use the aperture of f22 and 2/3, and you'd focus at 29.9 feet. So therefore, if you focused at this 29.9 feet, and the near plane was 15 feet, this would be your nearest, this would be your farthest, you'd be in focus for all that. So it would be no problem at all to do that subject. And again, here's our apertures. If we set it, would be f32 and 1/3 at 1 second would be what we'd need to do. So this is very convenient for checking to see if the depth of field worked for you. And again, we've got the memo, which has all the recordings that we've done, all the different holders. So the last one that we did, it's got all the information you need. So again, that exposure would be, let's say, f32 and 2/3 at 1/2 a second, and the developing time would be 7 minutes and 32 seconds. I hope that gives you all the details that you need to know about the Expo-Dev program. And any questions you have, you can always email me. Thank you for watching.